There were good white folk, saw, as well as bad. An elderly freeman remarked in 1867, after being asked his opinion of Uncle Tom's Cabin. But when they was bad, Lord o' mercy, you never saw a book, saw, that come up to what slavery was.
Good morning. Whether you're here in the sanctuary or watching from the library or at home, it's wonderful to be together today. My name is Shari Loe, and I'm your worship leader today while Reverend Sasha is away from the pulpit for study leave. As we settle in for the hour, let's pause to center our busy hearts, centering, and our minds for worship, for lifting up that which is of worth. Come, my friends, let us worship together.
It's time for us to light our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist tradition. This morning, Charlotte Walwork, one of our junior worship helpers, will light the chalice flame. Our chalice lighting words this morning are from Beloved by Toni Morrison. In 5 tries, he had not had one permanent success. Every one of his escapes had been frustrated. He never stayed uncaught, and in all those escapes, he could not help but be astonished by the beauty of the land that was not his. He tried not to love it. For a used-to-be slave woman to love anything that was dangerous, especially if it was her children she had settled on to love. The best thing, he knew, was to love just a little bit. So when they broke its back or shoved it in a croaker sack, well, maybe you'd have a little bit of love left for the next one. And now, please stand as you are able for our affirmation by James Vida Blake. Today, Charlotte Salisbury, another of our junior worship helpers, will lead us in our affirmation.
Please repeat after me. Love is the spirit of this fellowship.
Love is the spirit of this fellowship.
And service is its law.
And service is its law.
This is our great covenant.
This is our great covenant.
To dwell together in peace.
To dwell together in peace.
To seek the truth in love.
To seek the truth in love.
And to help one another.
And to help one another.
And now please remain standing, if you will, for our opening hymn. I tried to get here as quick as I could so you wouldn't have time to sit down. Our opening hymn this morning is number
56, Oh Freedom.
Number 156 in your gray songbook, Oh Freedom. Thank you.
For
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I'm Marjorie Wormser, today's worship associate, and welcome to the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Welcome especially to any newcomers, returning members, and anyone who joined us online today. There. If you're tuning in live on YouTube or Facebook, please say hi in the chat or comments, and we are delighted to have you with us. We are a community of many ages, and we worship all together. You can join us in many ways on Sundays, as Shari mentioned, including online, as well as here in the sanctuary or from the many rooms in our building where we live stream the service. And in particular, I'd like to draw your attention to the family room, which is out these doors and to the right. This is where families with little ones can go to, if you need space to talk, soothe a crying child, soothe a child in any emotional state, get the wiggles out, and our service is live streamed there so you won't miss a thing. Youth of all ages are always welcomed in our services, and we now offer an additional option for families with small children ages 9 months to 5 years. Child care for crawlers and toddlers. Parents, if you find yourself in need of child care at any point during this morning's service, please bring your little one to room 201, which is out these double doors and up the steps. At the top of the steps, room 201. We always have exciting things happening here at Morristown UU, and to help our service flow more smoothly and keep information about same-day events fresh in our minds, we now share announcements about fellowship activities at the end of our service during Minutes for Milestones. Minutes for Ministries. And again, welcome. We are so glad you're here today.
Could the young folks please come up and join me and Alasdair and Tom up here? I have books you can play with. All right, I guess I should be in the middle. Here. Doesn't matter. More. There have to be more of you. Come on. This is really an important conversation I want to have with you guys. It's an important thing today, Eric. All right. Oops, dropping my mic here. You have a picture. All right. Okay, guys. My name is Shari, as I said. That's Tom. This is Alasdair. And we hope after today you listen to the service and what we're going to talk about this minute, that you'll feel like you can come and ask us questions if you think about, or tell us about whatever you're thinking about, because this is hard stuff that we're going to talk about today. But to start with, I want you to use your imagination. Got it? Imagination? But, even though you're using your imagination, that can be just as true as something that is in the history books, right? You can write a book that has a little bit of history in it, but it can tell the story in a way that you will remember it even better than if you were there yourself. Later at coffee hour, I'll have some books you might want to be able to come up, and you can even borrow if your parents say it's okay. But back to imagining. Ready? Imagine, what if when you were born, you had people around you who belonged to you, that you owned, and you could make them do whatever you want. They could do your schoolwork, they could clean your room. And what if they just couldn't even leave unless you said they could, and they would always have to come back? What do you think about that? Can you imagine that, what that would be like? You wouldn't have to do work, just tell someone else to do it. What if you could hit them, or hurt them, or kick them if they didn't do what you wanted? And then if they ran away, because they didn't like it, then the police would just bring them back to you and probably hit them again. Now, how does that feel to imagine that situation? Does that feel good? Bad? Bad. Why does it feel bad?
Because it doesn't feel good to tell someone what to do and make them miserable.
All right. So you should know that what you're imagining was a real thing. It lasted until about 150 years ago. That was called slavery. Not for the people who were telling, but yes, of course it was about them, right? For the people who were being bossed around. The one other thing that you should remember, and this is really hard, is that the people who are being bossed around and kicked and hit, sometimes even killed, those were black people and sometimes Native American people. And the people who were doing the bossing around were white people. What do you think about that? What do you think? Iris, do you have a thought? Charlotte?
That's horrible because people should be treated equally, and just because you live there and you might have a different skin color does not mean you should be judged by it. You should be judged by what's inside you, not by what the color of your skin are or what you did.
What do you think? That's very good. What do you think? Think for a minute. What do you think the owners felt about this whole situation? How do you think they felt about it? Charlotte?
They didn't care. They were just mean enough to do that.
And how do you think the enslaved people felt?
Sad.
Sad. That is a very good word. So I know we don't usually talk. Oh, yes, Iris. Go.
And scared.
Yes.
They were probably brainwashed into thinking it was that they were scared of the other people.
Some of that, sometimes that did happen. That's right. They decided, oh, this must be because I'm not good enough. Yes.
I think they felt scared, sad, and hurt because they should be treated equally, and they probably tried to run away, but then got beaten up for trying to run away. But if you're being treated like that, you have the right to run away. If you're treated like that, it's fine to run away and be treated.
Well, thank you all so much for thinking hard about these hard things. I know we don't usually talk about things that are this sad and frightening, but Unitarian Universalists believe that we do need to be strong to talk about hard things sometimes. Because if we don't talk about things that are wrong or even horrible, but that are real, we can never know what's wrong or how to start to make things better. Our Unitarian Universalist values tell us to work for justice, so all can be part of our beloved community, and equity, because we believe every person is inherently worthy. Thank you for talking with us this morning and sharing your thoughts with this whole room of grown-ups. Wow. Thank you.
Now is the time in our service for milestones and passages. Sometimes we come to this sacred place with much on our hearts. Life is like a beautiful rose with sweetness and softness, but it can also have its thorns. Perhaps your family welcomed a new baby, or maybe you lost a loved one, have a new job, received a new diagnosis. Children have joys and concerns too, things that make you happy or sad. Whatever the roses or thorns of your own life, you can share them in our service by filling out a milestone and passage form before 9 a.m. on Sunday morning. The form can be found in our newsletter. Also, we have paper forms located at the table on your way into the sanctuary. And if there was anyone who submitted something online that does not get read this morning, we will be sure to include it next week, if we don't already have it here. We have a few milestones and passages to share today, and we ask that you please respond after each by saying, "We hold you in our hearts." Joe Hart says that he's just back yesterday from a funeral in Hayward, California, for his sister-in-law who passed away last Monday. It was the same pancreatic cancer that ended life for Joe's wife and for his wife and sister-in-law's mother. We hold you in our hearts. 20 years ago today, on March 30th, 2005, Walter Adam Stasiak passed away from this world. Of the many admirable things that Walt did in his life, one was in the late 1960s, where he taught African American history as part of his first teaching job at Del Barton School in Morris Township. He would be thanking Shari and Tom and Alasdair for their work in presenting today's service for our fellowship community. We hold you in our hearts. There are a couple of items that were submitted for milestones and passages which fit really neatly into minutes for ministries. So if you don't hear what you submitted, you will at the end of the service. And this is from Reverend Sasha Ostrom, our minister. This morning, it is with sadness that I share the news that longtime Morristown UU member David Zugail passed away yesterday. Details about a memorial service to honor David's life will be shared at a future time. Cards to his wife, Andrea, are welcome but not expected. We ask that you please hold off on phone calls for now during this time of grief. We hold David's wife, Andrea, along with all who knew and loved David in our hearts in this sad time. We hold you in our hearts. And as is the custom in our congregation, we light a candle in honor of someone who has just recently passed. Let's take a quiet moment now for the prayers and meditations of our own hearts. Please settle comfortably in your chair, close your eyes, and breathe. Hear the breaths of those around you in this community that holds you. Feel the spirit of life holding us all in this still moment. Let's take 3 deep breaths together and then a moment of silence. Amen and blessed be. And we come now to the time in our service each Sunday when we pause to offer our gifts of financial support to this congregation. Your donations make all that we do here together possible and also help make our wider community a better place. And that is because each Sunday we give at least half of the money collected to an organization that is doing good work to advance our Unitarian Universalist values of love, justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependency, and generosity in a world that hungers for them now more than ever. Today's offering will be split 50-50 with New Jersey Together. Your order of service was not quite correct. with New Jersey Together, who creates barrier-free solutions to homelessness, hunger, and poverty in Morris County. You may give in our collection plate or by following the instructions printed in your order of service or shown on the screen. And any junior worship helper who wishes to help the ushers pass the plate are welcome to come forward now. Thank you for your generosity. Every contribution makes a huge difference.
I've been in the storm so long. I've been in the storm so long, children. I've been in the storm so long, Lord. Give me little time to pray. Let me tell my mother how I've come along. Give me little time to pray. With my hung down head and an aching heart, give me little time to pray. I've been in the storm so long. I've been in the storm so long, children. I've been in the storm so long. Lord, give me little time to pray. Oh, when I get to heaven, I'll walk all about. Give me little time to pray. There'll be nobody there to turn me out. Give me little time to pray. I've been in the storm so long. I've been in the storm so long, children. I've been in the storm so long. Lord, give me little time to pray, to pray, to
Thank you, Kara, for that inspiring rendition. In the opening words today, Alasdair shared the opinion of a freed man in 1867 that no book can capture what slavery was at its worst. Yet, books are what we have, because no one alive today experienced American slavery. There was a project during the Depression, about 90 years ago, where they interviewed, this book, Voices from Slavery, I'm holding up, they interviewed every surviving slave, former slave in our country, and wrote down the interviews, and they're in the National Archives. So we have the stories. 100 of those are in this book, Voices from Slavery. Remember the man that Alasdair talked about who said there were good white folks and bad white folks? There are a lot of bad stories in this book. And I read a lot of books, but I got about a third of the way through, and I ran into a story that broke me, and I couldn't finish this book. But, slavery's over, right? Slavery's over a long time. Here's a printout available in Chew Hall of the article that Tom and I put together, a version of it for this service to give you background and maybe to help you understand it better afterwards. So please pick up a copy. But see this, I don't know if you can see this picture, but it shows brown hands shackled together by chains. It's from that book down there on the end, An American Story. So chains were real, and unfortunately, that was not the last time that they were used on black people. The last ship bringing slaves to this country crossed the Atlantic in 1859. There are two books that tell that story. Zora Neale Hurston interviewed a man named Cujo Lewis, who was a survivor of the 110 people on that ship, for this book, Barracoon. She interviewed him in 1927. This book was not published until 2018. This book, published in 2022, called The Last Slave Ship, tells the story of a reporter who found the wreck of the Clotilda in Mobile Bay, Alabama, in 2018. For this book, he not only did that, but he read Hurston's interviews, and he spoke with the descendants of the owner of the 110 people from the Clotilda, and they were slaves between 1859 and 1865. They had 5 years of that. And he also found a descendant of the Africans in Dahomey who had captured, imprisoned, and sold these people to be slaves. But yes, slavery was over in 1865, which is when the 24 states of the North beat the 11 states of the South, who had tried to split off from our country because they wanted to keep owning slaves, and they wanted to be able to own slaves wherever they went in our country, no matter how many new states came into the Union. To help win the war, started in 1861, in 1863, President Abraham Lincoln declared that all slaves in the South were freed. But they weren't really free until the North won the war in 1865. And that's when the last slaves in New Jersey were freed, by the way. But that was not the end of chains on black people in America. For maybe 10 years after the war, the North made laws that the South had to let the freedmen vote and run for office and be educated and have work they got paid for and be able to sue white people and testify against them in court. As the kids fully understood, many, probably most of the Southern whites were angry about this, and they started to violently attack both Northerners and blacks. But then by 1876, the government changed, and basically the North stopped helping protect blacks or enforcing these laws. So the South passed Jim Crow laws that kept blacks from voting or even riding on the same streetcar as white people. There were even rules saying that a black person could be charged with a crime for leaving a job without permission of his employer. For trying to vote or leaving a job or not being able to prove they had a job, black people in the South could be arrested, and then they were actually sold by the state or even sometimes the judge who had sentenced them and made to work in horrible conditions for however long their sentence was. They could be chained together. There the chains are back, while they swung sledgehammers to mine coal. They could be whipped and beaten again. How do we know? A reporter found a shallow grave outside an abandoned mine in Alabama. Then they discovered hundreds more of those graves. The reporter heard that, yeah, that was bad, but, they were criminals, and, we really don't have any records. So he went to look in the old places, and guess what? He found 100,000 pages of records in one county in Alabama alone. And that's how we know that these people were criminals for trying to vote or for talking loudly with a white woman in public and other ridiculous, horrible things. The book that tells this story, Slavery by Another Name, was published in 2009. This thing we're talking about is called convict leasing. And even though it became illegal in 1928, it kept happening all the way through the beginning of the Second World War in the 1940s. And all during this time, as we explain in our handout, black people were being killed just directly by white people for similar things or for nothing. All the way, unfortunately, really until today. And so, starting around 1910 or so, blacks left the South. Though they still felt tied to it, from 1916 through the 1970, millions of African Americans moved north and west to see if it might be better. And now, please stand as you are able and let us sing the opening Zulu verse and the first English verse of song number 172 in the Gray Hymnal, Siph, Amandla.
I was taking a part of the South to transplant in alien soil, to see if it could grow differently, if it could drink of new and cool rains, read in strange winds, respond to the warmth of other suns, and perhaps to bloom. This is a poem by Richard Wright.
Blacks who stayed in the South started fighting back and working for change through lunch counter sit-ins and later the civil rights movement. Many were killed, as were some whites who came to help them. But the blacks who left and went north in search of the warmth of other suns also found segregation, along with exorbitant rents and so many other barriers. My parents lived in Detroit in the 1950s, and I found a letter from my father where he talked about a black man trying to rent in the same place my parents lived, who was charged hugely more than they were. This book, called The Color of Law, tells a story about how our government used redlining and other tactics to deliberately segregate American housing starting in 1933. Because of redlining, which means that your banks are not supposed to lend any money to help you buy a house in those areas, blacks couldn't buy houses while whites could do so and then build wealth to pass on to their children. And this deliberate housing segregation meant that the black children went to inferior schools. And that was legal until 1954, which is the year before I was born. We can celebrate what has changed, but much has not. Today, blacks are more likely to be put in jail for things that whites are not jailed for. A white applicant with a felony on their resume is more likely to get a job offer than an equally qualified black person without a felony on their resume. It's endless. Tom will go into more of the ongoing harm as he talks of the possibility of repair, so wait for that. My dad went to medical school at the University of Texas on the GI Bill in the late 1940s, so he didn't have to pay for his degree, but he did owe the Army 4 years of service afterwards. The GI Bill was administered through the states, so for him that was Texas. So that worked for him, but Texas had no medical schools that accepted blacks at that time, not till 1956. So a black soldier his age would have been out of luck. And again, deliberate, the Southern senators made sure to write the GI Bill so it would work just like that. 1956 was the year after I was born, and the year after this fellowship was founded. This is recent. It has been stunning to me how much of this history is just being unearthed. I'm trying to collect and read as much as I can, especially now as censorship seems active from our very government. But as I told the children, sometimes fiction can distill the essence of history as well or better as all these books. The story of Beloved by Toni Morrison starts right after slavery has ended, but keeps looking back to how horribly the characters in it suffered in that time. The people in it are haunted by the past, but Morrison helps us transcend that horror and lift up the desperate, shining humanity of these people, who are almost more real to me than all the numbers and dates in these other books. And so I chose Morrison's words for Alasdair to have read as our chalice was lit, to help make these awful truth stories real. Imagine having to temper your love for your life and your children. And now, please remain seated, and let us sing the second and third English verses of the song 172, Siph, Amandla.
A financial reckoning adopted from Ben in the Storm So Long. At the end of the Civil War, when Yankee soldiers came to a Tennessee plantation, one owner instructed her former slaves, "If they find that trunk of money or silver plate, you'll say it's yours, won't you?" For she believed that Yankee soldiers wouldn't take the property of newly freed slaves. "Mistress," one of the slaves replied, "I cannot lie over that. You bought that silver plate when you sold my 3 children."
As explained in a newsletter article and in the handout, Shari mentioned reparations are based, the concept of reparations based on the concept of repair. Repair is necessary when something has been broken. The newsletter article explains the UN criteria for reparations and more, and I will not go into that in detail That's covered in our article as well. 2 years ago, when I spoke as part of our service on slavery in New Jersey, reparations for the state, for the slave period and its legacy in New Jersey was a fairly new topic. Reparations is an internationally recognized legal remedy, and though both California and New Jersey have studied reparations, we haven't made much progress in delivering on those studies. There's not been a national conversation about it, although H.R. 40 was introduced by our Representative John Conyers of Michigan in 1989 and has been introduced continuously since that time. Nevertheless, reparations itself is not widely understood. The New Jersey Reparations Council has made available some of its findings of the harms that have been caused to the African American community by slavery and the ongoing attempts from that time to continue the oppression of black people after slavery that Shari has mentioned here. As discussed in more detail in our article, the harms found in the California and New Jersey studies were quite similar. These harms include the fundamental harm of chattel slavery itself, the harm of continued racial inequality in employment, education, and just living life, the economic harm of income and wealth disparities. Intergenerational wealth transfer has been hampered by redlining and other discrimination that were outlawed less than a lifetime ago. One fact worthy of repeating from the handout is that the median wealth of white families in New Jersey is $322,500, while the median wealth of black families in New Jersey is $17,700. Environmental injustices. Black communities have become sacrifice zones, bearing the brunt of pollution and environmental hazards due to purposeful racist policies. Their air and water quality is worse, and that's one reason health outcomes are worse. The harms caused by racial history have carried forward to the structure of public safety and justice systems. We all know of the problem of over-policing of black communities, the severe racial disparities in incarceration rates that have resulted. Poor people are just more likely to go to jail than better-off people. Blacks are still more likely to experience excessive force, unreasonable search and seizure, and unreasonable search and unlawful seizure. Inflicting these harms has been made easier by segregation in areas like housing and education. Segregation was originally based on deliberate choices. It's clear that all of these harms are interconnected and interlocking. Discrimination in employment leads to wealth disparities and exacerbates housing disparities. Discrimination in housing leads to educational disparities, wealth disparities, etc. What are the remedies? Recognizing that reparations may properly address to both individuals and communities, the New Jersey Reparations Council is developing possible remedies to alleviate the public health crisis in black communities, for example. This necessarily will include financial support, as detailed in the handout. Providing universal access to quality health care is highlighted as a critical component of a reparative framework, which of course would benefit everyone, not just the black community. Breaking the de facto segregation that exists in American public schools and in New Jersey public schools is a strong component in a reparative framework. Given the strong link between residential school segregation, actively combating discriminatory housing practices is critical. To obtain the public support needed to start to redress these harms, all Americans need to know the history of slavery, segregation, and their ongoing impacts. As we've shown here today, the history is still being uncovered. Rather than being taken out of it, This history needs to be put into our educational system at all levels, including before high school, to foster understanding and challenge myths. So where does this leave us? Reparations are hard. This should come as no surprise. Look at where we are as a nation as we struggle with diversity, equity, and inclusion. The path to repair will be difficult. Pick any of the topics we've mentioned above as part of the path to repair and see if you can draft a plan to take us from where we are now to where we need to be. It's not easy. For example, it would seem straightforward that national universal health care would be a great step forward in addressing the health crisis in the Black community. But national health care is itself a difficult issue. Let's think these things through together and look for opportunities to make strides when and where we can. Now let's rise in body and spirit, sing together our closing hymn for this morning, number 149, Lift Every Voice and Sing. Kira will lead us in singing this in the American Sign Language version. So let's sing together this final verse. Thanks.
Before we close, I'd like to draw your attention to our minutes for ministries, when we share brief updates about our congregation's activities to help us stay engaged with our community beyond our Sunday service. Any newcomers with us today who have not already done so are invited to fill out a welcome card to help you get connected with us, and that's at the welcome table that you passed when you first entered the doors to the building. You can also talk with our welcome ambassador, who would love to meet you and answer any questions you may have, and look for the sunny gold sash. Who's wearing a sunny gold sash this morning? Carolyn Evans will happily greet you and answer your questions. Thank you, Carolyn. Anyone needing a caring presence this morning will find a compassionate listening ear with one of our lay pastoral care associates, and you'll recognize them by their blue sashes. And I see Carolyn Schwartz in the back is wearing a blue sash. So, or not, but she's available to do that very important role and with a gentle listening ear. You may notice that you haven't seen a fellowship friend at a service or at a fellowship activity recently, and this may be a good time to reach out to them, contact them, and see how they're doing. Okay. Tim Davis, our stewardship trustee, advises our annual budget hyperdrive this past week has hit the milestone of $136,000 to our $490,000 goal. This is 27% to our goal in the first week. Amazing. If you didn't pick up your pledge envelope last week, it was mailed to your address last Tuesday, and if you haven't received an envelope by now, please reach out to stewardship@muuf.org. Don't forget to get your pledge in today if you haven't already done so, and thank you so much. And Jean Kraft reminds us that today we begin gathering wisdom from the fellowship around our second open question, which is how do we thoughtfully use our expanded space and facilities? Please join the Committee on Ministry and board members in the Chew Hall at 11:30. That will be after our social hour following this service. Finally, yes, please join us in the Chew Hall out these doors to the left. Keep going and left again. You can see the building from these windows. Please join us there after our service for social hour, and full details about these and many other activities can be found in the back of your order of service, as well as our weekly e-newsletter and on our website, muuf.org. We have a moment to spare, and if there are any announcements that are needed at this time, I would invite you to come up. And I don't see anyone moving, so that concludes our minutes for ministries. Thank you.
It is time now for us to bring our time of worship to a close. Though we extinguish our chalice flame, its light will continue to burn in our hearts. As we prepare to go out into our daily lives, I leave you with these words, excerpted again from Beloved by Toni Morrison. And when she stepped foot on free ground, she could not believe that her son, Holly, who had worked his life to buy her freedom, that he had known what she didn't. That Holly, who had never drawn one free breath, knew that there was nothing like it in this world. It scared her. Something's the matter. What's the matter? What's the matter? She asked herself. She didn't know what she looked like. She wasn't curious. But suddenly, she saw her hands and thought, with a clarity as simple as it was dazzling, these hands belong to me. These are my hands. Next, she felt a knocking in her chest and discovered something else new. Her heart was beating. Her own heartbeat. She couldn't stop laughing. My heart's beating, she said. And it was true. Ashe. Amen. Blessed be, and go in peace. We'll meet you in the coffee hour with the handouts and a few books.